Hey everybody, so let's talk about Bitcoin and we'll talk about the rest of the crypto assets. We'll also talk about the stock market for a little bit and then Federal Reserve as to see how that is going to impact the price of Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto assets or risk assets going forward. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Okay, first thing first, we're looking at Bitcoin. As we could see, this is a yearly chart. Bitcoin has been breaking down. One thing to keep in mind is that it's been respecting that trend line that's been in place since September of 2022. We kept going up to it and we would get rejected every single time. Right around November of 2023, when we broke above it, we came back and tested it. It gives us more confirmation that this level is something to watch for because we have had one, two, three, four, five, six tags off of it. Four tags as resistance, and so far, three, four tags as support. So that's level to watch. The way we're breaking down right now and the way this channel has been in place, it almost coincides perfectly as to what you would expect it to hit, which is right around that $48,000, our downside target, which also coincides with the bottom of that channel. So it gives us an additional confirmation that this is the likelihood or this is the scenario that's has high likelihood to play out since we are in the throes of uh, kind of end of the bull year cycle for the risk assets and the stock market, crypto assets will most likely follow what the stock market does. Uh, High beta, high risk assets tend to follow. And so, regardless of what it is, so we're going to follow that, and it all follows the liquidity channel. So it just shows that it's not just nonsense. There's a pattern that how it plays out. So keep an eye on this. If Bitcoin does break down, we have a downside target of 50,000, which will coincide with the bottom of that channel right here. But if it takes longer time to break down, then I do expect that we'll hit that $48,000 as our first target. Now, that's a very optimistic target. What do I mean by optimistic target? Today, Friday, the job payroll numbers has been released and it was not very optimistic. So what that is going to follow up with is that there's a built-in belief that Federal Reserve will basically lower the interest rate or cut the interest rate by 50 basis point. Now that likelihood a few days ago was right around 30-40%. Now that likelihood has jumped up to approximately 70%. What the Federal Reserve does is that it watches that likelihood and tends to act exactly based on what the market expects. And the market expects 50 basis point right now. So Federal Reserve is more likely going to cut the interest rate by about 50%, 50 basis point in September. And so, if that's not sufficient enough and the market still freaks out and the job numbers are weaker than expected, then we do see a potential scenario where this all breaks down to approximately that second target of around $36,000. That is a very high likelihood. Reason I'm saying that is because the job numbers have been weak consistently. The top techs in the stock market, for example, like Nvidia, like Broadcom, like Tesla, like Google, like Amazon, they have all reported, but their reports were not ideal, and they were all forecasting basically a breakdown in the economy and softening in the consumer. So what that does is that if they have that kind of expectation going forward, what they're going to do is hold off on their investment, hold off on their money, and less money cycles around, which means there's less money to flow into risk assets. That means all these things have a high likelihood of breaking down until the Federal Reserve comes back in, pushes liquid into the market, and that'll help increase the stock prices of all these assets. And I'm talking about Bitcoin, stocks, gold, whatever you pick any commodity, and then I'll push it all back up. It's just a part of the like a business cycle, a 4-year cycle of liquidity, and how that liquidity flows affects everything down the line, regardless of where you're located on the risk curve. Higher the risk curve, you get affected first. Lower the risk curve, you'll get affected later down the line of when you're almost done with that bull cycle, the 4-year bull cycle. So we're almost at the end of that 4-year bull cycle for the stock market and liquidity cycle. Uh, Federal Reserve is going to start increasing that going into 2025. So the fact that they've indicated that they're going to lower the interest rates, they're going to do whatever they can to be more accommodative to the risk assets and the general economy gives me some hope. But what has happened consistently is that the Federal Reserve has always been too late to the party. And that's what the stock market, and that's what the crypto assets, and that's what just general investors are expecting. That Federal Reserve will always be too late. They were too late to start increasing interest rates. They have been always too late to start decreasing interest rates. So that ensues panic and everybody starts selling everything. So we do have a scenario that could potentially play out with a very high likelihood. And then I could see Bitcoin somewhere around that $38,000. So keep an eye on that. We'll take a look at ETH/USD. We'll just cover the top 5 or top 10. That'll kind of tell you exactly what's going to happen with the rest of the crypto assets, right? So the same exact things have been playing out with ETH, and ETH has been in this downtrend ever since. Um, and what I expect to play out is that we're going to come down, test that $19,000 level. We're going to keep bouncing up and down in that channel until we get into 2025 or late 2024, where the investors have a high likelihood or more confidence that the Federal Reserve is going to lower interest rate enough to push more liquidity into the risk assets, and then everything just goes up. I do expect that end year 2025 target of approximately 8,000 or above for Solana for ETH. I'm sorry. I do expect that we're going to probably hit that 10K as more likelihood, as a higher probability scenario. And so keep an eye on this. And remember, if you guys have any questions or you want me to look at any specific chart for any of the crypto assets, just put it in the comment below and I'll do my best to cater to that and kind of give you my breakdown as to what I think. Solana has been the leader. They have experienced some weakness, but remember, the weakness that Solana has experienced is nothing in comparison to some of the rest of the high risk, high beta um, chains that I'll basically talk to you about, and we'll kind of go through it as to why I think that way. So let's take a look from the March highs. We're down approximately 36%, right? So now let's take a look at what do I mean by that. Let's take a look at Avax USD. Now, Avax USD from the March highs, we're looking that we have experienced about 75% approximately. Let's take a look at Matic USD. Matic USD from the March highs, we are down what 70%, 72%. So that's what I mean when I say that Solana has been the stronger altcoin. It has experienced approximately 30 to 40% pullback, but that's also in line exactly with what Bitcoin has experienced. There's a lot of money that's flowing in here. There's a lot of optimism. There's their TVL, which is total value lock, that has been increasing. It's one of the metrics that you want to keep when you want to invest in a specific chain. Solana's TVL has been consistently increasing. They've been working on projects. They have gained the confidence of investors, and there's a lot of venture capitalists that have put tons of money into this. So there are a bunch of targets for that as well. They do expect a Solana ETF to be approved sometimes either this year or next year. I doubt it'll be this year, but most likely next year, which will also push in more liquidity and more money from ETFs into Solana. And that's why I have an optimistic target for Solana, approximately 700 to $800, and that's basically uh, Solana capturing approximately 5% of the total market cap of all the crypto assets. Now it is at the top 5, top 10, so it's very likelihood it has a high likelihood that it'll actually capture that and be trading approximately $700 to $800. Now Vinac, Bro, Paul, they have more of an optimistic target. Specifically, Vanek has a target of $2,500. That's end of 2025, and Raul Paul sees it approximately $1,200. I am more on lower end of that, I see approximately anywhere between $800 to $1,000 as a very optimistic case scenario. So we'll see how that all plays out. But it's one thing that you want to keep in mind, that you want to invest in a relatively lower risk curve. And then if you want to put in some money in high beta, high risk curve, that's up to you. But I recommend that it's a smaller percentage of your total investment size. And so let's take a look at AVAX USD. AVAX USD has not been the stronger. We have to admit that. We had this lot of head and shoulder that exactly play out how we thought it's going to play out. But I did not expect that it would have that kind of correction to the downside. My downside target initially was that 23.50. Now we're actually below that, and we're trading somewhere around that $21. Now, if the Bitcoin scenario plays out as I outlined, that we see potentially $40,000, then I do see, or even lower, then I do see that AVAX will trade all the way down to that $10, $12, as in a worst case scenario, $8 as my target. So keep an eye on that. And now if everything breaks down, remember all these high risk, high beta assets will be sold first. So most of the money will flow into low beta, low risk. And AVAX being high beta, high risk, believe me, they'll sell it out pretty damn fast. So keep an eye on this. It is important. However, I do have end year target for 2025 on AVAX to be somewhere around the all-time highs, around 150, $160. I definitely do see this as the leader in that market. They have been had some partnerships with Google. They have partnerships with Amazon. They're doing a lot of things with development and tokenization. Their total value locked has been relatively okay. So all these metrics give me a confidence that they've been consistently developing. Their chain have grown a lot. And they're constantly acquiring partnerships and making waves in Department of Tokenization, tokenizing all assets into the future. So it's one of the play that I have in mind. It's my top 10, and I do expect that I will break that all-time highs of 150, 160 end of 2025. So keep an eye on this. Don't sleep on it. But those are some of the targets you would want to watch. And now the other thing I want to talk about is Matic. Matic has not performed well at all. It has not been developing very fairly. It has not, the total value locked has not budged at all. Their development team has not done anything since their partnership with Starbucks, which is a long time ago. And Starbucks is kind of breaking down, so I don't have a high confidence in Matic sustaining itself, especially after we broke out of that wedge that I had outlined. I thought that it'll be able to kind of test it as a support and bounce off of that. But the minute it broke down that $78, I think it was 78 cents, sorry, it was a game over for Polygon. I do see Polygon, if the worst case scenario for Bitcoin plays out, I see Polygon at 10, 15 cents. So my first target for Polygon is at 24, 25 cents right now. And I do see it testing that probably 10, 15 cents as a worst case scenario. So keep an eye on that. We'll also take a look at Bonk. Now, Bonk being a side chain of Solana and it being a meme coin, I would not necessarily put a lot of money into this, but if you wanted to keep with Frenzy and put some money just for the fun of it in extremely high beta, high risk, and high reward scenarios, Bonk is something to keep an eye on. We are trading in that range of this wedge. If this wedge does break down, we're going to test all time lows for sure. And then that'll be a good point to pick off of the lows. Remember, this is a very high risk, high beta investment. So adjust your risk and adjust your investment based off of that. We'll also take a look at XRP. Um, Ripple has been okay. Their performance is relatively okay, and that's because of all their legal battles and all the initial investors that are in there, all the hedge funds that are in there. They still don't know what they want to do, how the regulatory environment is going to play out for this. I do not necessarily invest in XRP. And I personally stay away from it. I'm not going to invest in XRP at all, but I am looking at my target of the 29 cents as being target number one. So keep an eye on that. We're also going to look at Say USD. For a lot of times, people have been touting Say as the next Solana because of their transaction speed and actually finality, which is more important. Has performed pretty well from November 2023. We went up to that 100 that $15, $16 area, and now we have retraced all the way back down to that support. I do expect that support to hold around that 20 cents and then bounced off of that. They have been developing, their transactions per second are increasing, their total value locks is increasing. They do have a lot of venture capitalists and a lot of money in that as well. So I do expect that this will perform well. One more thing that I want to talk about is CAS, which is CASPA. This has performed well above and beyond what I expected. A lot of people, a lot of venture capitalists, a lot of initial seed investors um, are touting this CAS as the next Bitcoin, which I doubt that is. But their transaction speed, their finality, the fact that they did not have an ICO and they did like more of a fair share where everybody was able to acquire this at a relatively like nobody necessarily had a first dibs on this. So you as an investors at any given point were able to invest in CAS. So it did more of a fair launch, in my opinion. So we'll see how this performs. But so far, since 2023, it has performed really well and has been able to actually hold their gains. So from the bottom of that 2023, we're up 3,000%. I do feel that it's going to perform really well. And I'll do a deep dive on CAS as to why I think that. And then you guys can give me your opinion. We'll take it from there. So keep an eye on these couple of them. And then we'll also take a look at QQQ, which is the NASDAQ ETF. So QQQ has been breaking down. We'll also take this is daily. So I do expect they will test that 400 level on QQQ first. That's the most likely scenario. That's going to play out exactly like that. That's target number one for me. And then I have a worst case scenario target for QQQ to be right around that pivot low of 255 or more like 235. So what does that look like? That looks like approximately 25 two looks like almost 50% correction. So that's my worst case scenario. I know that sounds brutal and a lot of people are going to be scared, but I have a first target for QQQ to be 24, 25% below. And believe it or not, that's the very high likelihood that it'll play out exactly like that. Because remember, all the high beta, they're all been breaking down. Let's take a look at NVDA. So NVIDIA has been breaking down. First target for NVIDIA is around 95. From the top, we're down approximately 30%. Now, I would not be surprised if we test out the prior pivot low um, of that 74. So if we do test that 74, that puts us approximately 50% from the top. So that's kind of in line with QQQ as to why I think QQQ will break down because they're all the major companies that form QQQ all breaking down. So the ETF will eventually have to break down. We're looking at AVGO. That's down 27, 28%. My target for that is approximately $91, which puts that at 50% from the top. So remember, if all these things break down, if all these high beta giants break down, it is not surprising to see Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto assets break down. And when these guys break down by about 40, 50%, Bitcoin or most of the crypto assets being in a very high beta, high risk, high reward scenario, they will break down a lot more. So if stock market goes down by 50%, you can expect Bitcoin to be down 75%. So nothing is out of the ordinary. This is a very uncertain environment. So keep an eye on these things. Make sure you have your targets. Make sure you have some dry powder, and whatever projects you believe in, make sure you do your research and then invest in that based off of the target that I have assigned. Now, if you have a specific coin that you want me to look at, please comment down below and I'll do my best to cover that. All right, buddy. Thanks so much and have a wonderful weekend.